Aha! This is Laborz, and it is so nice to have you here. Painting yellow can be a little bit tricky sometimes, so Papa Laborz will show you how to paint yellow over black. Alrighty, we start with the face, and our innermost layer is the inside of the mouth, so I cover that with burnt red. For the skin, I use a 50-50 mix of burnt red and brown rose. I cover all the surface of the arms and face. Wolverine has a pale skin tone, so this brown will serve us as our darkest shadows for the skin. I prefer a little bit more yellow or orange skin tones, but since the suit will be yellow, I need a different approach this time. I paint the eyes with white grey. Use a base layer consistency and shape your brushy's tip on your hand. I'm just doing a rolling motion to make the tip pointy, like Granny's nipples, okay? Then we need to go in from the sides. If you make too big eyes, you can just go back with black and fix the area around it. And if you fail again, you paint the whole thing black and repeat until you succeed. Then we paint the teeth. Similar approach like with the eyes, but you need to make vertical brush strokes and leave a tiny bit of black between each tooth. So what if we make a mistake here? You guessed it, we paint it black and start over. It's the same process when your parents go separated and after a while they get back together. Will they stay together this time? You don't know, but it was probably your fault that they got separated the first time because you gave up before painting at least half decent eyes and teeth. Now we start with the highlight process of the skin with brown rose. Keep some recessed shadows between the muscles and keep the laughing wrinkles around the mouth to create a more feral look for the face. Once I'm happy with the highlights, I start the blending process with a thin layer consistency. I move the paint over the recesses of the muscles and the wrinkles that face up towards our light source. I do this to make the recessed shadows more natural looking, since it doesn't really make sense to keep them too dark, because they face towards our light source. I reduce the highlight areas over the skin with a mix of brown rose and the basic skin tone. I add more value to the top half of the arms, but I keep some of my previous layers visible to have some contrast in values. On the face, I highlight the cheeks and the chin. I blend in the new layer with some thin layers again, starting the brushstroke in the previous layer and ending in the recent one. Where I feel like the recessed shadows are too dark, I go over the areas, but I don't get rid of them. The more you get rid of the recesses, the muscles will be less defined and you will increase the body fat percentage of Wolverine in no time. And yeah, I know when we are painting, we always paint ourselves into what we paint, but Wolverine is lean and jacked, so don't make him fat by getting rid of the recessed shadows. Okay, for our last highlight, we will use basic skin tone. I use that with a thin layer consistency and paint the maximum highlights of the skin. Emphasize all the top part of the muscles following our basic highlight shapes. This will create that nice and pale skin color. It's desaturated, but Wolverine, like with most of the superheroes, our suit is the main attraction and not the skin. So that is where we need more saturation, but creating a desaturated area next to a saturated one creates some nice tonal contrast and makes the suit pop out more. Alrighty, let's start with the suit. I mix some phoenician purple to light brown and cover all the yellow parts. There are two areas where I apply less layers, the sides of the torso and the bottom area of the glutes and legs. We have some purple in the mix for some complementary shadows that will make our yellows stand out more. Also, the suit has these black stripes over the sides and the shoulder. There are three ways you can go about it. You either paint extremely precisely in the upcoming steps, avoiding to make mistakes, or you don't care at all and paint all over them, and when the suit is done, you paint the stripes black. The latter is faster, but you need to be very careful to not paint over the suit with black and get a huge slap on your tiny hand. Okay? Now the third way is to fix them between each step. So you go back and forth with the black and yellow fixing parts. It sounds like more work, and it is, but it less stressful because you will get used to fixing small parts instead of making one round of fixing with black, but see for yourself which works best. Okay, now we reduce the highlight areas with light brown. This color actually looks cool for the brown suit Wolverine, if you prefer that. Leave some tiny line between the two stripes going down vertically on the suit to have more definition on them. I apply these highlights like light is coming from exactly above and just a tiny bit to the right. So the areas that need more volume are the chest and thighs. I add more volume over the left side of the abs, and I emphasize the wrinkles on the back. As you can see, this is not really yellow. I like to use black primers, and when I started to paint miniatures 4 years ago, I came to a problem that I think a lot of you guys encountered. You can't really paint yellow over black. I mean, you can applying around 40 layers of paint over the surface using thicker and thicker layers as you are more desperate and thinking, man, this paint sucks. And then you buy another yellow paint and it's just the same. All the yellow paints cover poorly over black, so we need to build up these highlights so we can create a nice yellow suit, because these layers will be our undercoat for yellow. If I would use the white primer, then it would be super easy to cover it with yellow, but then we would need to build up the shadows over yellow, and basically what we are doing right now is exactly that. This will be our shadow halftone for our yellow. If you don't know what colors to use to shade yellow, just use some warmer browns that are not too low on value. At this step, I apply my maximum highlights for the suit with ice yellow. When I apply these highlights, I keep in mind that these areas have to be big enough for our yellow midtones and the maximum highlight areas. On the back, I first apply a mixture of ice yellow and light brown, so skip ahead which method you prefer, jumping straight to ice yellow or build up the highlights with one more step. With ice yellow, we are going to use a lot of stippling, so we are creating little dots around the areas we like to blend, and then we glaze over them to make our gradient smooth as Granny's butt cheek. I made a longer video about blending on Patreon, if you're interested, and I plan to do some exclusive videos about technique every month or every other month, depends on how much time I have. So if you want to understand the basics of blending, check it out, because in these videos where I paint the whole mini, I can't spend an hour talking about one step, because it's not really working with this format. Also, at this step of my painting journey, I'm pretty confident that on 30 to 38mm stippling is the best blending method. If you look at it, how much time and effort does it take to blend something, but you need to be extremely fine with those small dots to have nice results. So yeah, I'm quite excited to see how much better I can get with this technique. As I said, on the back I used a mixture of light brown and ice yellow before jumping to ice yellow. I add less volume to the highlights, like it would receive less of a light source. I follow the muscles of the back with my highlights, and that also highlight some of the wrinkles of the suit. Once I'm done with the sketching, I apply multiple layers of glaze to make the transition smooth like Granny's butt cheek. Make sure you remove the excess from your brush on a paper towel so the glaze won't pull on the surface and won't dry to a splotchy finish. I go back on the back with ice yellow for the maximum highlights with some thinner consistency. Off-whites are covering pretty well with more diluted consistencies as well, and we can build up the layers to have a nice transition, but a little bit of glazing could never hurt. To have a nice and saturated yellow suit, we need some nice and saturated yellows. Shocker, I know. I chose phalanx yellow and I apply it between the shadow halftones and highlights. Do you know how we call the area between the shadows and the highlights? That's right, this will be our midtone. Now, the effort we put into our blends and the value of ice yellow going to make this step quite fun. I use thin layers of yellow to make the midtone more and more saturated, and the more layer you use, the more vibrant the color will get. Now, before you get too excited, be aware that you can get rid of your maximum highlights while applying multiple coats of yellow. If that happens, I will slap on your tiny hand, and make no mistake, Papa Laborz is not your stepdad, so I don't have to go easy on you, okay? You need to leave some of the ice yellow highlights visible. To add some more depth to the shadow areas, I will glaze some phoenician purple over the shadow halftones. I pull the paint in the shadow halftone to the darkest shadows, so I don't paint over the highlights. I also do this on the skin. This also gives a nice hue to the shadow area since the skin is brighter yet more desaturated compared to the suit. So now the suit is more or less done. It's time for the blue boots and the gloves. I cover all of their surface with Night Lord's blue. Wolverine's gloves and boots, like the rest of his suit, is changing from version to version regarding the fabric of the suit. Some versions are more matte and some are more glossy. Next, I use my favorite blue, caledor sky, to place the midtones. Now on the ID card, the color is a bit more desaturated, so if you prefer that, then just mix some light gray to the caledor sky. I cover around 50% of the surface on each part. On the gloves, I follow the wrinkled up cylinder shapes with my highlights, and on the shoulder armor, I like to create that glossy or metallic look that the character has on the ID card, so I create these rectangle shapes over the cylinder shapes without any blending. I add some ice yellow to the caledor sky and reduce the highlight areas. On the gloves and boots I blend in these highlights, but on the shoulders I try to emphasize the fact that they are not made of the same material. On the shoulder I place this highlight next to the Night Lord's blue layer, but inside of the caledor sky layer. It's like when you are painting chrome and these horizontal lines are not random reflections, but they are reflecting the horizon. Add more ice yellow to the mix and make two thin lines next to the Night Lord's blue inside our previous layer, so the shoulder armors become shiny and chrome. Time for the claws and other metal parts like the helmet on the ground, and we will do some minor highlights over the mask to add some shape to the cheeks and eyebrow area. I do some edge highlights over the mask and boots, and I cover all the claws with this color. Contrast is much like Granny's wheelchair, and we need to push it to make it work. So let's reduce the highlight areas with light gray. I'm using thin layer consistency and I build up my layers on the claws over time. I even go thinner with the consistency to have some smoother blends over those chunky claws. If you need to, go back and forth with neutral gray on the glazing part for nicer results. To make those claws more shinier, I reduce the highlight areas more with white gray. The more areas I cover with white gray, the shinier it will get, but if you prefer a higher contrast look for the claws, just leave some more darker grays. On the helmet I do the same, but I keep that to a neutral gray as the mid-tone. Lastly, I do some edge highlights with pure white to make the claws sharp. I go over all the edges with the base layer consistency. Be very gentle with your brush, don't apply too much pressure or your edge highlights will look messy and you can ruin the gradients and need to start over the whole claw painting process. Okay? Use the edge of your brush's tip and be precise or I will slap on your tiny hand. The rest of the video is Patreon exclusive. If you like to access that content and see how we paint some nice rocky base with an OSL effect, you can find the link in the video description. Huge thanks to my patrons who support this kind of videos. If you're interested in PDF guides for other characters of the game that won't receive a video guide, and you like to access to some exclusive content, please consider joining my Patreon page. The link is in the video description. And a special shout out goes to Cold-Blooded Don, Trying to Paint Minis, Jonathan Mosner, Glitchy McCrash, and Penoman45. I hope your day will be as smooth as a granny's butt cheek.